My son stood in the living room. I raised him in, arms crossed, voice cold, and told me I had 24 hours to leave. His wife, Tiffany, stood just behind him, hands folded neat like she was waiting for a restaurant table, not evicting someone from their own home. "Mom," Floyd said, "this isn't personal. It's already in motion. The papers are signed. You agreed to this last year." I blinked. My hand was still wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold. "Agreed to what?" Tiffany cut in. "You transferred the deed. It's all legal. The buyers are ready to close by Thursday." I didn't respond right away. I just looked at the place where the light hit the old wood floor, same as it had for decades. The same floor where Floyd took his first steps, where Curtis dropped his toolbox every Friday after work. "I never signed anything like that," I said. "Finally." Floyd looked uncomfortable, but Tiffany didn't flinch. "Well, you did. We have the documents." I wanted to stand up. I wanted to shout. But I didn't. I just sat there, quiet like the breath had been pulled out of me. I was 70 years old. I'd lived in this house for 50 of them. I planted those trees outside. I painted the kitchen walls myself one summer when Curtis was working nights. I knew every sound this place made, from the creak on the third stair to the way the back door stuck when it rained. And now I was being told it wasn't mine anymore. Floyd shifted. "We didn't want it to come to this. But it's for the best. You can't manage this place by yourself anymore." "I manage just fine," I said. "Always have." Tiffany smiled, but it wasn't kind. "We've lined up a nice apartment for you. Senior-friendly. No stairs. Maintenance included." I stared at her. "I didn't ask for an apartment." "You don't have to ask," she said. "We took care of it. It's already leased." The room was still, except for the ticking clock on the shelf. "Like I said," Floyd added, "you have 24 hours. Just enough time to gather your things. The moving truck will be here in the morning." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just stood up, slow, and walked to the window. The backyard looked the same as it always had, overgrown, but peaceful. I remembered Curtis planting that lilac bush near the fence, said it would bloom best in morning light. It still did. "You really believe I signed over this house?" I asked, not turning around. Floyd hesitated. The notary was there. "It's in black and white." I thought back to a stack of papers Floyd had asked me to sign a year ago. He said they were insurance updates and estate planning, and I didn't question it. I trusted him. He was my son. I should have read them. Tiffany picked up her purse. "We'll check in tomorrow afternoon to make sure everything's ready for the movers." Then they left. I stood in that same room for a long time, just listening to the silence. The kind that settles in your bones when you've been blindsided. I walked through each room of the house like it might be the last time, ran my hand along the banister, sat on the edge of my bed, thought about packing, but didn't touch a single thing. Then, just after 4 o'clock, someone knocked on the door. I thought maybe Floyd had come back. Maybe he realized he'd gone too far. But when I opened it, it was a man in a dark suit holding a clipboard. "Judy Robinson?" he asked. "Yes. I'm Howard Kensley, from Heritage State Bank. I just need a moment of your time, ma'am." He had kind eyes, the kind that reminded me of Curtis when he wasn't wearing his city uniform. I nodded and stepped aside. He looked around the house with a short nod. "Beautiful place. You've kept it up well." I didn't know what to say, so I just said thank you. He pulled out a few papers from his folder. "I'm here because we received a title transfer request on this property. A fast-track sale with cash deposit pending." I felt my heart beat faster. Yes, my son said it's already done, that I signed the deed over. Howard raised an eyebrow, then did something I didn't expect. He laughed. Not loudly, just a quiet chuckle, like someone who's seen this kind of thing before. "Ma'am," he said, "you're still the sole owner of this house. No one can sell it without your signature. And I mean your real one." I stared at him. "The title is protected under a trust your late husband filed with us back in 2006. You're listed as the controlling party. It's written clear as day that any change requires your notarized, in-person consent, which we never received." I felt the room tilt a little, like someone had lifted a heavy weight off my chest I didn't know I'd been carrying. Howard handed me a copy of the paperwork. "I'd be happy to explain everything in more detail, but in short, you're not going anywhere unless you want to." I sat back down in my chair. The coffee was cold, but I took a sip anyway. So much had just shifted. In one day, I'd gone from almost homeless to holding proof in my hands that someone still had my back, even after he was gone. And in that quiet moment, I realized something. Curtis had seen this coming, and he'd already done what he always did best. He protected me. But this story isn't just about a man from the bank, or a paper someone tried to slip past me. It's about the people you trust, and what happens when they forget who you really are. Let me tell you the rest. I moved into this house on Maple Ridge Drive in the spring of 1974. Back then, the street didn't even have sidewalks, just gravel edges and a few street lamps that flickered at night. The neighborhood was still growing. You could sit on the porch and hear birds without the hum of traffic. Curtis and I were newly married when we bought it. We were both 24, and neither of us had a clue what we were doing. He worked for the city water department. I just started at a small local office, doing admin work and keeping books for a plumbing company. We didn't have much, but we had enough to get that loan. The house was small, one story, with faded siding and a leaky faucet in every room. But Curtis walked through that front door, turned to me, and said, "This one feels like it'll last." And it did. I remember we spent our first night sleeping on the floor in sleeping bags, eating cold sandwiches because the oven wouldn't light. We didn't care. It was ours. Curtis planted the 2 maple trees in the front yard himself, said they'd be tall enough to shade the house someday. I painted the kitchen cabinets green, even though it took 3 coats, and the whole place smelled like paint for a week. We bought furniture secondhand, curtains on sale, and curtains rods from the hardware store around the corner. We made it work. Floyd was born 3 years later. I brought him home from the hospital in a flannel blanket my mother sewed. I laid him in a little bassinet right beside our bed and stared at him for hours. Curtis used to hum to him in the evenings, low and steady, like he was trying to put the whole house to sleep. We turned the extra room into a nursery, painted it soft blue. Curtis built the crib himself. I remember how proud he was when he finished sanding it. That house saw everything. It saw late-night feedings, spilled juice, and scraped knees. It saw birthday candles, Christmas trees, and Sunday roast dinners. Curtis fixed what broke, and I cleaned what got dirty. We hosted friends. We watched storms roll in. We slow danced in the living room, sometimes just because the record player was on and the mood felt right. Curtis wasn't a loud man. He wasn't flashy. He did what needed doing and didn't expect praise for it. He kept the water department job until the year before he passed. 42 years. Same office, same coffee mug. He passed in 2010. Heart failure. He was only 61. 1 minute, he was outside fixing a loose shutter, and the next, I was calling an ambulance. He never made it home from the hospital. The day after the funeral, I sat on the front porch for hours. It felt like the whole house had gone quiet in a different way. I didn't know how to move without him, but I had to. So I started with small things: sweeping the porch, making the bed, boiling water for tea. The neighbors brought casseroles and pies. Some stuck around to talk. Others just left things at the door. I was grateful for all of it. After Curtis was gone, the house became something more than a roof. It was the only thing that felt steady. When people say 4 walls and a roof, they don't always understand what that means to someone who's lived in the same place for 50 years. It's not just a house. It's your life with corners. I still keep his mug in the cabinet, still sit in the same rocking chair in the sunroom where he used to read the paper. I never changed the wallpaper in the hallway because he picked it out himself. My days now are simple, and that's how I like them. I wake up with the sun. I check on the garden, just a few tomato plants, herbs, and 1 stubborn row of squash. I make coffee, read the paper, maybe do a crossword if my eyes aren't too tired. I walk to the thrift shop twice a week to help out with sorting clothes or tagging items. Nothing big, just something to keep me moving. I go to church on Sundays. Not for the sermons, if I'm being honest, but because I like the music and the way people smile when they see you come in. I sit in the 4th pew from the back. I've done that for years. The house has always given me more than I asked for. A place to raise a son. A place to grieve. A place to start again, even when I didn't think I had it in me. That's why what Floyd and Tiffany said didn't make sense. I've never missed a mortgage. Never took out a second loan. I paid the taxes on time. I've never once been late with a bill, not even when Curtis was sick. So when Floyd looked me in the eye and said I signed over the house, I felt like the floor dropped out beneath me. I trusted him. I trusted that if I ever needed help, he'd be there, not looking for a way to hand me off like a problem. I thought back to all the times he said, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll handle the paperwork," or "Just sign here, it's easier this way." I didn't think twice. Why would I? He was my son. But now I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in him, that maybe I hadn't seen it coming because I didn't want to. That's the hard part about getting older. You start to wonder if people see you as part of their life or just in the way of their next chapter. I sat in the kitchen that evening with the documents Howard left. I read every line twice. My name was on every page. Curtis had set up a trust that protected the title. No one could touch the deed without my clear, notarized approval, and I never gave that. So I made a decision right then. I wasn't leaving, and I wasn't staying silent. Not anymore. Floyd wasn't always like this. He used to be the kind of boy who'd run home from school with wild stories and pockets full of rocks. He made me cards out of notebook paper, folded like little books, and signed them, "Love you forever, Mommy." On Mother's Day, he'd pick dandelions from the yard and put them in a jelly jar, proud as anything. He'd fall asleep in the back seat after Sunday church, mouth open, head tilted, holding tight to his little Bible. Curtis used to say, "He's got your heart." And I believed him. Even into his teenage years, Floyd was kind, quiet, thoughtful. He never gave us trouble. He helped mow the lawn, brought in groceries without being asked, and always said goodnight before bed. He got good grades and stayed close to home for college, took business courses at Ozark Valley University, and worked weekends at a hardware store nearby. I don't know exactly when things changed. Maybe it was when he met Tiffany. He brought her to dinner one night during his junior year. She was polite, said all the right things, but there was something in the way she looked around the house. Like it wasn't enough. Like she was already thinking about what she'd change. She asked questions about the property, about how old the roof was, about whether Curtis had left a will. She didn't ask what my favorite room was. She didn't ask about the lilac bush. After they got married, I noticed Floyd began to shift. At first, it was small things. He stopped calling every week, stopped coming by unless there was something he needed to pick up. Then it was the way he spoke, less warmth, more business. He'd say things like, "We need to start thinking long-term, Mom, or you don't want to be handling a house by yourself forever. Tiffany echoed him. We just want what's best for you. At first, I thought they were just trying to be helpful. I appreciated the concern. I really did. But after a while, their visits felt more like check-ins, like they were keeping tabs. One day, Floyd brought over a folder, said it was just some paperwork to make things easier down the road. What kind of paperwork? I asked. Oh, he said, waving his hand, estate planning stuff, just routine. It helps avoid confusion later. I'll walk you through it. I didn't understand most of what was in those papers, but I trusted him. He sat next to me, pointed at the lines to sign, and said, "This just confirms I can help manage things if you ever can't." I believed him. He did that more than once. Each time, it was a new folder, always wrapped in good intentions, always to make life easier. And each time I signed, because he was my son, because I never thought he'd take advantage of me. Tiffany didn't say much during those visits. She sat on the edge of the couch, scrolling through her phone or sipping from a stainless steel water bottle. But whenever Floyd left a paper behind, she always gave him that look. The kind people give when they've gotten exactly what they came for. One evening, she stayed back while Floyd went to the car. She looked around the living room like she was inspecting it. "You've done well keeping this place up," she said. "Thank you," I replied, folding a dish towel in my lap. "I mean, for your age," she added, glancing at the stairs. "It's just a lot of house. Don't you get tired?" I shrugged. "Some days." "Well," she said, standing up, "it won't be your problem forever." That stuck with me, not in a good way. Still, I brushed it off, told myself maybe I was reading too much into things. But then, a few months later, they started talking about transition plans. Said it was better to sort out ownership now rather than deal with it later. Floyd said, "You don't want things getting messy when you're older." It stung. The way he said it, like I was already halfway gone. They talked like I wasn't in the room sometimes, about liquidity, real estate equity, and long-term gains. I just sat there, nodding, not wanting to seem difficult. I didn't want to start trouble. I didn't want to believe what I was starting to feel. Looking back now, I can see it clearly. They were laying the groundwork, one form at a time, one little signature here, one, trust me, there, until in their minds, they'd built a case that this house was no longer mine. And I foolishly let them. It's not easy admitting that. Not when you've spent your whole life doing the right thing, raising your child the best way you knew how, teaching him kindness, honesty, patience. I never expected him to turn on me, and I certainly never thought I'd be seen as a problem to remove. I raised Floyd in this house. I stayed up with him when he was sick. I helped him through math homework. I washed his clothes, packed his lunches, cheered at every baseball game, whether he played or not. I gave him everything I had. So when he stood in my living room and told me I had 24 hours to leave, I didn't just feel hurt. I felt replaced, not just by a younger woman or a new life, but by a mindset, one that saw family not as something you protect, but as something you manage. That's when I knew this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a plan. And I had to decide if I was going to let them carry it out or remind them exactly who built this house. I used to look forward to Sundays. Back when Curtis was alive, Sundays meant a roast in the oven, the sound of the radio playing old country songs, and folding napkins while the kitchen filled with the smell of potatoes and onions. Floyd would help set the table, always putting the forks on the wrong side, and Curtis would pretend not to notice. After Curtis passed, I tried to keep the tradition going. It gave me something to look forward to, a reason to tidy up the house, and wear real shoes instead of slippers. At first, Floyd and Tiffany came over every other Sunday. Sometimes they brought a store-bought pie. Sometimes they just showed up and sat stiffly like they had somewhere else to be. Tiffany never really relaxed in my home. She'd pick at her food and glance around the dining room like she was taking mental notes. "This place could really use an update," she said once, tapping her nails on the edge of the table. "These cabinets are original, right?" I nodded. "Curtis built them, sanded and stained them himself." She tilted her head. "You ever think about replacing them? Something cleaner, brighter?" "They work just fine," I said. Another time, when I'd hung a new floral curtain in the kitchen, she smiled and said, "That's sweet. Very nostalgic." I didn't respond. I just poured the tea and kept the conversation moving. Little by little, those dinners stopped feeling like visits and started feeling like checklists. They always arrived late and left early. Tiffany spent more time on her phone than she did making eye contact. Floyd, for all his politeness, barely asked how I was doing. He'd ask about the house, if the roof was leaking, if the insurance was up to date, if the plumbing had been checked recently. They never asked what book I was reading or how my knees were holding up. Eventually, Tiffany stopped coming altogether. Floyd came by himself, but never stayed longer than an hour. He brought takeout instead of eating my cooking, said it was just easier. I stopped setting the table for 3. I stopped cooking big meals. I stopped talking much at all when he came over. I listened, nodded, answered questions when asked. But something between us had gone quiet, like a radio turned down low in another room. You know it's still on, but you can't quite make out the words. Then came the comments about space. "You really should consider downsizing, Mom," he said one day while walking through the hallway. "This house is too much for one person." "I'm fine," I said. "I've managed just fine." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I just think you'd be more comfortable somewhere with less to worry about." That word again, comfortable. They always said it like it meant safe, like I couldn't be trusted to live on my own anymore. But what they really meant was convenient. It would be more convenient if I lived in a 1-bedroom unit in some development with a call button on the wall. Another time, I told Floyd I was thinking of replacing the old washer in the laundry room. "Just let it go," he said. "You're probably not going to be here much longer anyway." I looked at him. "What do you mean by that?" "Oh, I just meant it might not be worth the expense, that's all." That night, I didn't sleep well. My thoughts kept circling around his words. The way he looked at the house, the way he talked about liabilities and future planning. He used to ask how my garden was doing. Now, he asked about the property tax rate. I used to think the silence in the house was just part of getting older, part of losing people. But now I realized it was something else. It was the sound of being slowly pushed out. They even discouraged me from having visitors. Tiffany said it was risky having people over with no formal security system. Floyd said, "What if someone trips on that old step out back? You'd be liable." They spoke like they were protecting me, but they were really chipping away at my independence, one sentence at a time. Eventually, I stopped inviting anyone over. I stopped hosting church friends for tea. I skipped the holiday potluck one year because I just didn't feel up to pretending. My home didn't feel like mine anymore, not the way it used to. I started keeping the blinds closed. I stopped trimming the hedges out front. I let the curtains in the dining room fade without replacing them. It was like part of me had already started to let go, even though I didn't understand why. Now I do. They were setting the stage, making it easier to claim I couldn't keep up with the place, pointing out everything that could go wrong. So when they finally said it was time for me to go, it would sound like a solution instead of what it really was, a decision they'd already made. Looking back, I ignored a lot of signs, because it's hard to believe your own child would treat you like a problem to manage. You want to believe you're still part of their world, not something they're trying to phase out. But as each Sunday passed, as each conversation grew shorter and colder, I started to feel the truth pressing in from all sides. I hadn't lost my place in their life all at once. They just made it smaller. And now I knew this wasn't just about a house. It was about being erased, one quiet dinner at a time. It was nearly noon when I started packing. I didn't know where to begin, so I just stood in the hallway for a while, staring at the shelves. They were filled with picture frames, little trinkets, a ceramic bird Floyd made in elementary school. The kind of things that don't seem like much until someone tells you to pack them up. I picked up a box from the garage and brought it inside. My hands felt heavy, not from the weight of it, but from the knowing, from realizing that after 50 years, this was how I was supposed to leave my home, quietly in cardboard boxes. I just opened the closet in the hallway when I heard the knock. It wasn't Floyd. He wouldn't knock. Not now. And it wasn't the movers either. It was too early for them. I walked to the door, still holding the pair of gloves I'd pulled from the shelf. I opened it slowly. There stood a man in a navy suit, not too young, not too old. He carried a leather folder and had a bank pin on his lapel. "Mrs. Judy Robinson?" he asked. "Yes. I'm Howard Kensley. I work with Heritage State Bank. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." I hesitated. "Is this about the house?" "In a way," he said, nodding. "May I come in? Just for a moment." I wasn't sure what to say. The last thing I needed was another stranger telling me what I already knew, that my time here was up. But something about his tone made me step back and open the door wider. He walked in, glanced around the living room like he was measuring the place, then turned to face me. "I'll get straight to it," he said. "Our office received a flagged transaction late last week regarding the property at this address. It triggered a secondary review." I didn't know what that meant, but I nodded anyway. "My son told me the house was already transferred." I said, "That I signed it over." He said there's a buyer waiting and that I have to leave. Howard raised his eyebrows. "He told you that?" I nodded. He gave a short laugh. Not a rude one, just the kind people make when they hear something so wrong they have to smile a little. "Ma'am," he said, "you're listed as the sole deed holder on this home. Your husband, Mr. Curtis Robinson, placed this property into a personal trust in 2006. You are the trustee and the beneficiary." I stared at him, but he said I signed something. "You may have signed something," he replied, "but not anything that changes ownership. The protective clause your husband filed states clearly no sale, refinance, or transfer of this home can happen without your notarized signature. And that includes the trust. No one can act on your behalf without a legally recognized power of attorney, which you have not issued." I took a breath. "So it's still mine?" He opened the folder and pulled out a paper with my name in bold across the top. "It's more than that. It's protected. And your husband was very deliberate. He set this up so you'd never be pushed out of your home, especially not without knowing." I didn't know what to say. I sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. Howard handed me copies of the trust documents. "I brought everything you'll need. If your son attempts to proceed with the sale, our office will notify the authorities. Forging consent on real estate transactions is a felony." I looked down at the paperwork in my hands. Curtis's name was there. His signature. A little note in the margin from the lawyer, confirmed with Mr. Robinson that all protections remain in place for surviving spouse. He'd thought of everything. Howard gave me a few minutes to take it in. He didn't rush me. He didn't talk over me. He just waited. Finally, I looked up. "Why now? Why did you come today?" "The buyer's title agency called us to verify details before closing," he said. "When our office saw your name still on everything, We put a hold on the transaction and pulled the old records. That's when I decided to drive down here myself. I nodded slowly. They told me I had 24 hours. You've got as much time as you want, he said. This house isn't going anywhere unless you say so. Something in me eased, just a little, like I'd been holding my breath for days without realizing it. I stood up and shook his hand. Thank you for coming, I said. He smiled. Just doing my job, ma'am. But I'll admit, it's nice when doing your job means helping someone stay where they belong. He left a business card and promised to check in later that week. Said he'd make sure the attempted transaction was fully shut down and recorded. After he left, I sat in the living room with the documents spread out in front of me. The silence was different now. Not heavy, not sad, just still. I thought about how careful Curtis had been, about how much he must have worried after his diagnosis. He never said much about it, but he must have known the risks, the way people change when money's involved, the way good intentions can turn. I closed the folder and placed it on the table. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I made a pot of coffee, and for the first time in a long while, I drank it in my own kitchen, not as a guest in my own home, but as its owner. Because no matter what anyone else had planned, Curtis had already taken care of me, and now it was time I did the same. 2 days after Howard came by the house, he called and asked if I'd be willing to come into the bank. There's more you should see, Mrs. Robinson, he said, and I think it'll help you understand just how serious this is. I agreed, even though my stomach turned a little just hearing those words. Serious. I was already carrying enough weight as it was. But something told me this wasn't just about property papers or legal forms. Something else was going on, and I needed to see it for myself. So I put on my brown cardigan, packed my bag, and drove to the Heritage State Bank branch on Eastwood Avenue. I hadn't been in a bank building in years. I do most of my banking over the phone now, or by check, like I've always done. Howard met me at the front. He gave a quick smile and led me to a small glass office near the back. It was neat and quiet, a desk, 2 chairs, and a computer screen already pulled up with files. He didn't waste time. He pulled out a folder and placed it in front of me. Let me start with this, he said, sliding the papers toward me. Your husband, Curtis, filed this trust account in 2006. You are listed as the sole trustee and title holder, and your rights were locked in. I saw that already, I said. You showed me the other day. Yes, he said, but what I didn't tell you then was why we were alerted in the first place. He opened another folder, this one stamped with bright red across the top, flagged for review. These, he continued, are the documents submitted by your son, Floyd Robinson, just under 3 weeks ago. He attempted to refinance the house and secure a personal loan using this property as collateral. He listed himself as co-owner. I stared at the paper. There it was, his name typed right alongside mine. Under authorization was what looked like my signature, except it wasn't. That's not mine, I said. That's not how I sign anything. Howard nodded. We didn't think so either. Your signature on file from our documents is nothing like this. That's why the system flagged it. He pointed to another line. And here, he stated you were unavailable for confirmation due to ongoing health limitations. I looked up at him. He said I was sick. He did, Howard replied. Claimed he had full legal authority under something called a family consent clause, which, to be clear, doesn't exist. That's not a real thing. He clicked on his computer and brought up another file. It showed an email thread between someone named Tiffany R. and a man from a local realty office. I didn't even have to ask. That's your daughter-in-law, Howard said. She'd already contacted a buyer. Cash sale, fast close. No inspection required. My heart sank. Who was the buyer? I asked. Howard pulled up a name I didn't recognize, but beside it was a note, Private Investment Group, affiliate of Midwest Property Solutions. She's a flipper, Howard said. Buys homes under market value, fixes them up, sells for a profit. We looked into her. She's flipped 9 homes in the last 14 months. She and your daughter-in-law appear to have a personal connection. Friend. Howard nodded. Possibly more than that. Hard to say exactly, but it's clear this was coordinated. I sat back in my chair, trying to take it all in. Floyd and Tiffany hadn't just made a mistake. They hadn't just jumped ahead without asking. They tried to take my house. They planned it, wrote it up, filed it, sent it through channels hoping I wouldn't catch it in time. They thought I'd just go quietly, that I'd pack up and leave like a problem being moved out of the way. Howard waited a moment before continuing. We have everything documented. You're protected, and the attempted refinance has been blocked. No action will be taken against you, and your property rights are fully intact. What happens to them? I asked, can they get away with this? That depends, he said carefully. If you want to press charges, we'll support it. Forgery and attempted fraud are serious. But if not, we'll just report the denial and mark the file closed. I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me wanted to file every report I could. The other part just wanted to go home and sit in my living room in peace. Howard looked at me with something like concern. Not pity, just quiet understanding. Take your time, he said. Whatever you decide, this place is still yours. I thanked him, gathered the papers, and walked out of that bank feeling something different. Not exactly relief. Not yet. But power. A small bit of it. And after what I'd been through, even that small bit felt like something I hadn't had in a long time. I drove home slow, past the hardware store where Curtis used to buy his nails and screws, turned down Maple Ridge, and saw the roofline of my house peeking through the trees. It was still there, still standing, still mine. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. It wasn't just about the money or the paperwork. It was about what they tried to take without asking. My history, my safety, my voice. And now that I had it back, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't letting go again. I called Floyd the next morning and asked him to stop by. I didn't tell him why. I just said I needed to talk face to face. He said he and Tiffany would swing by that afternoon. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a setup. I just wanted them to look me in the eye. I spent that morning cleaning, not because the house needed it, but because I needed to keep my hands busy. I wiped down the counters, swept the porch, and straightened a few picture frames. The air felt different now, like the house had stretched its back and stood up straight again. When their car pulled into the driveway, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a folder in front of me. I didn't stand when they walked in. I just nodded toward the chairs across from me. Floyd looked unsure. Tiffany, on the other hand, looked like she'd just come from a meeting. Hair done up, heels clicking, not a speck of dust on her blazer. So, she said, placing her purse down, "Are you packed?" I opened the folder. "No," I said, "I'm not." Tiffany glanced at Floyd, who didn't speak. "I thought we'd sit down today and clear up a few things," I said calmly, "since you've both been making some decisions about this house. I figured you should see the documents you base them on." I slid a copy of the trust agreement across the table, then the title records, then the flagged refinance application with the forged signature. Floyd picked up the first sheet and turned pale. Tiffany didn't move. "I don't understand," he said, eyes jumping across the page. This isn't what I was told. I thought." "You thought wrong," I said. "You tried to sell a house that doesn't belong to you." Tiffany scoffed. "Oh, come on. This is just some mistake. We were trying to help. Those were just standard documents. No, I said. They weren't. And you know it. She crossed her arms. Then maybe your memory isn't what it used to be. Maybe you forgot signing something. I looked her dead in the eye. My memory is just fine. And even if it wasn't, the bank has every record, every form, every signature. I didn't forget. You forged. Floyd put his head in his hands. Mom, I leaned forward slightly. Your father knew something like this could happen. That's why he protected me. He made sure that if anyone ever tried to take this house from me, they wouldn't get far. Tiffany stood up. This isn't over. You can't prove intent. If you think we're just going to walk away. I cut her off. Feel free to bring in a lawyer. I have one now, courtesy of Heritage State Bank. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Floyd looked like he might cry. We just wanted what's best for everyone, he said quietly. You live alone. The house is too big. You don't have anyone to help. I took a slow breath. No, I said, you wanted what's easiest for you. He didn't deny it. You didn't come here because you were worried about me. You came because this house is worth something now. And you didn't want to wait. Tiffany picked up her purse. This is ridiculous. I stood up. No. What's ridiculous is being treated like a burden in my own home. What's ridiculous is watching my only child help someone forge my signature. What's ridiculous is thinking I wouldn't find out. Floyd looked at the documents again, then at me. I didn't know she was going that far. He said, I just thought we could help move things along. I nodded slowly. You moved plenty. They stood there, quiet. I walked them to the door, just like I had when they were guests at Sunday dinner. But this time, there was no small talk. No hugs. Just silence. Before they stepped out, I said one last thing. Your father built this house with his own hands. He didn't leave me a mansion or a fortune, but he left me peace. And you tried to take that from me. Floyd looked at me like he didn't recognize the person standing in front of him. Tiffany didn't look back at all. They got in their car and pulled away. I closed the door behind them, turned the lock, and stood in the hallway for a moment. Not angry, not sad, just clear. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone else to decide my future. I already had it in writing, and now it was time to live like it. 3 days after Floyd and Tiffany left, I opened the drawer in Curtis's old filing cabinet. It had been years since I really looked through it. Most of the papers were dull, manuals from appliances we no longer had, old tax returns, instructions for the ceiling fan we replaced in '09. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I think I just wanted to be near him. Even now, after all these years, there are certain things that still carry his way of doing things. His handwriting, the way he folded papers with clean corners, even the way he used paper clips instead of staples. In the back of the drawer, tucked between two thick folders, was a small white envelope. No stamp, no address, just my name written in his handwriting. Judy. I stared at it for a long while before I opened it. The paper inside was lined and folded in thirds. It looked like it had been there for years, but it hadn't yellowed or curled. Curtis had written it with a blue pen, steady hand, like he always had. The top of the letter said, If you're reading this, then I probably didn't get a chance to say all of this out loud. I felt my throat tighten. I know you'll still be here long after I'm gone. He wrote, You're stronger than you think. You've always been the one who holds things together, even when everything else falls apart. I sat down slowly in the chair by the window, the one he built himself with pine wood and a worn cushion I'd sewn from leftover curtain fabric. I tried to keep up with life the best I could. The letter continued. But time catches up to all of us. I didn't want to talk too much about the future, because I didn't want to scare you. but I thought about it every day. This house is more than just a place. It's our story. Every inch of it has something we built together. I can still see your smile when we painted the kitchen that horrible yellow the first time. I can still hear Floyd laughing in the bathtub down the hall. I remember sitting on the porch with you after long days, holding your hand and saying nothing at all. That was enough for me. I had to stop reading for a moment. I wiped my eyes and took a breath. Then I kept going. You've given your whole life to this family, and I want you to know I saw it. Every packed lunch, every hard decision, every time you chose love over comfort. I saw it all, and I respected you for it more than I ever said out loud. That's why I protected the house. I went to the bank and made sure your name was on everything. I asked every question I could think of. I told them what mattered. I didn't want anyone, no matter how close, to ever make you feel like you didn't belong here. If they try, just know I saw it coming, and I already handled it. That sentence hit me square in the chest. I didn't know how he'd known. Maybe it was a feeling. Maybe it was just the way the world was changing and the way people had started talking about assets and retirement plans like they were chess pieces. Or maybe he just knew our son better than I wanted to admit. Don't ever let them talk you out of who you are, he wrote. You are the strongest person I've ever known. And if you're holding this letter, it means you've already lived through something hard. But you're still here. Keep sitting on that porch. Keep watering your plants. Keep singing in the kitchen when you think no one's listening. You are the heart of this home, and no one can take that from you. I sat with that letter in my lap for a long while. The afternoon sun came through the window and landed on the floor in the same spot it always did, right where he used to read the newspaper every Sunday. I hadn't cried in a long time. Not real crying. Not the kind that comes from somewhere deep down, past the place where the daily aches and quiet disappointments live. But I cried then, because I realized that while I had spent the last few weeks feeling powerless and forgotten, I'd been holding something stronger than any contract or title the whole time. I had love, real love, the kind that plans ahead, the kind that leaves a trail just in case you lose your way. Curtis didn't have much growing up. He didn't leave me a fortune. He didn't own stocks or property all over the place. But what he gave me was better. He gave me a home and the right to stay in it. He gave me a chair that never broke, a garden that still grows, and a letter that reminded me I wasn't invisible. I folded the paper and placed it back in the envelope. I slid it into the top drawer of my nightstand beside a small stack of family photos and the church bulletin I saved from the last Sunday. He sat next to me in the pew. Then I sat back in the rocking chair and looked out the window, the sun warming my face. The house was quiet again, but not in a lonely way. This time, it felt full. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for something bad to happen. I was just here, alive, steady, and seen. The first thing I did was change the locks. Not because I thought Floyd would come back, but because it felt right. Like drawing a line quiet and firm. I called a local locksmith named Marvin. He came out on a Thursday morning, didn't ask many questions. Just said, some things are worth protecting, and got to work. I stood in the doorway while he replaced the knobs. The old keys sat on the counter in a dish I'd kept near the phone since 1985. I picked them up, turned them in my hand, then dropped them in the trash. New locks, new keys. New chapter. After that, I went to the backyard and pulled out the dead marigolds Tiffany once called a mess. She said the garden was too much for someone my age. I remember her saying, why keep putting energy into something that's just going to grow wild? That stuck with me for a while. Made me second-guess things I'd always loved. But now, I replanted tomatoes, basil, peppers, lavender along the fence. I bought a bag of mulch and a new pair of gloves and got to work. My knees ached, but I didn't care. The dirt under my nails made me feel like myself again. A week later, I invited Nancy from next door over for tea. I hadn't done that in a long time, not since before things got uncomfortable, before I started keeping the blinds closed and avoiding small talk. She brought cookies. We sat in the kitchen and talked about her grandkids and how the high school changed principals again. It felt good, easy, like it used to. I realized I wasn't lonely, not anymore. I'd just forgotten how it felt to be at ease in my own space, to move through the house without tiptoeing, to open a window because I wanted to, not because someone said it was time for fresh air. I still think about Floyd. I probably always will. He hasn't called since the day I showed him the documents. I imagine he's angry, embarrassed. Maybe he's spinning a version of the story that makes more sense to him. That's fine. People tell themselves all kinds of things when they don't want to face the truth. And the truth is, I don't hate him. I'm disappointed. Hurt, yes, but not bitter. I raised him the best way I knew how. I gave him love and structure and a home that held him. I can't control who he became, but I can decide how much space I give to that pain now. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means I can move forward without carrying his choices on my back. I've started volunteering again, twice a week at the thrift shop like I used to. I sort clothes, chat with the other ladies, help fix the price tags when they peel off. It's simple work, but it gives me purpose. I like that. Some afternoons, I play records in the living room. Curtis loved those old country albums. There's one song that always makes me smile, the one we used to dance to after dinner when the dishes were done and the world felt just right. I water the maple tree out front every other day. The one Curtis planted in 1976. It's tall now, wide enough to shade the whole front porch in the summer. He used to say, "One day, this'll keep us cool when we're old and tired." And it does. The house still creaks in the same places. The back door still sticks when it rains. The guest room still smells like lemon polish. It's not perfect, but it's mine. And I don't need permission to be here. The paper said, I own the house. The bank confirmed it. But what Curtis really left me wasn't just land and wood and brick. He left me a voice, a way to stand up when someone tried to sit me down, a quiet strength that said, you don't have to accept what's been handed to you if it was never yours to carry. I think about that every time I sit on the porch, every time the wind moves through the trees or the mailman waves from the sidewalk. Life goes on. Seasons change, but some things stay steady if you protect them. And now, I want to ask you something. What would you do if your own child tried to take your home of 50 years, but your late husband had already outsmarted them from the grave? Would you let it go? Or would you finally change the locks? If this story meant something to you, I'd love for you to share it. Leave a comment below and tell me what part hit home. And if you want to hear more stories just like this one, real ones, raw ones, the kind that stay with you, go ahead and subscribe, and click the bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for sitting with me. I'll see you again real soon.